This is HD Media Gameday Insiders, a West Virginia high school sports podcast.
Hey, welcome into the first ever edition of our HD Media Gameday Insiders podcast. Adam Rogers, Taylor Kennedy, happy to have you with us for this first ever edition of the show. And Taylor, we kind of got a little bit of a jump start last year during a lightning delay where we kind of inadvertently said, this actually wouldn't be a bad idea. And then I joined HD Media back in March, and we've been kind of working on this for a while, and here we are for this first episode now.
Yeah, your people got with my people, and eventually those people said, hey, maybe we should do a podcast. And
we made it all work.
For the people that were watching that GW lightning delay.
Man, that was a
long
lightning delay.
I don't know if you want to call that like a simulcast, or you want to call that a telecast, or just two or three guys just sitting around just talking about freaking cereal of all things.
Breakfast sandwiches.
Yeah, breakfast sandwiches, whatever you have.
You can expect more of that kind of content on this podcast and an awful lot of high school sports talk, because that's what we're doing on this Game Day Insiders podcast, talking nothing but high school sports. So that's what I'm excited about, because now I get to live, eat, and breathe high school sports every day of my job, and it's not a side thing anymore for me. So getting to be in this full time now, I'm excited about this podcast, and especially working with you again, Taylor. We had some fun last year, and we figured why not run it back again full time.
See, don't flatter me. You didn't have to flatter me. I get it. I get
a little bit. Got to flatter a little bit. Right?
Not really, but I appreciate. No, but in all seriousness though. No, you're 100% right. I mean, I've been doing the high school sports now for going on full-time this will be my fourth season, third year at the Charleston Gazette-Mail, even dating back to when I was at Metro News. I wasn't doing it full-time, still doing it part-time here and there, doing some football, some basketball for the most part. But, yeah, it's that time of the year again. I know we'll have some football games. I know moving forward you and I will talk more extensively about games on Friday nights.
Yeah, and just to be sure to make sure we tell everybody tuning in for this first episode, we're not going to focus just on football.
Yeah.
It is going to be soccer, volleyball here in the fall. We'll talk basketball. We'll talk baseball and softball. We might throw some fishing in when high school fishing comes around. I know Spring Valley's got a good fishing program down there. We might work that in. We could talk robotics. There's all kinds of high school sports activities going on that we can talk about throughout the course of this podcast over the year. But on this first podcast, though, we do have a very special guest for this first iteration of our podcast.
Yeah, we're going to be joined here in just a couple of minutes by the executive director of the West Virginia Secondary Schools Activities Commission and Mr. Wayne Ryan, talking everything in regards to the transfer rule, the 4-class system, some hard-hitting questions. We'll also talk briefly about how Charleston has done in the first few seasons of hosting the state football championships as it enters its third season. Is there a possibility for a fourth? You'll have to figure out and follow along with us throughout the course of the next segment.
Yeah, so that'll be coming up here in just a few moments. We'll step aside, hit that quick break, and come back, and we'll be joined by the executive director of the WVSSAC, Mr. Wayne Ryan. That's coming up right after this on the HD Media Game Day Insiders podcast.
Football season is here, and GoMart has your gold and blue playbook. All August long, follow our weekly plays for your shot at the ultimate WVU fan experience. Plus, GoMart Rewards members are in the end zone with triple points every Tuesday. Not suited up yet? Sign up now to start scoring. Don't get caught off sides. Get your entry in before we call the final whistle. Winners announced on The Rich Rodriguez Show on September 7th. Check out the app or go to gomart.com for details.
HD Media Game Day is your streaming home for the best in live high school sports across West Virginia. Featuring football, basketball, soccer, and more, HD Media Game Day brings the action to you for free, exclusively on our YouTube channel and at hdmediagameday.com. When you can't make it to the game, HD Media Game Day has you covered.
Welcome back into Game Day Insiders here on HD Media Podcast. Adam Rogers, Taylor Kennedy, happy to have you with us. And we're joined by a very special guest for our first issue of this podcast, Executive Director of the WVSSAC, Wayne Ryan, joining us here in the studio. Thank you for coming in and joining us today, Mr. Ryan.
Well, you're welcome. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad I can.
And again, kicking off the podcast with you for our first show. You're getting ready to go into your second year now as school's starting up across the Mountain State. What's one thing you learned from your first year in the job as the executive director of the SSAC? I know you'd been around for over a decade now with the WVSSAC, but what's the one thing you learned in year one as the head guy in charge?
Well, I would say this. This position, it's very important that this person understands every aspect. And, I was fortunate enough in my previous career to be an athletic director, to be a school administrator, to be a coach, to be a parent of an athlete, and to have previously been an athlete. And I think that background is really crucial to the position because it's a unique position. There's only 51 of them in the country. It is unique. I also know for a fact that I learned that the first thing I had to do was hire almost a complete new staff, and I hit a home run there. So I'm very thankful for that. Chris Wells, Jason Bankston as a director of compliance and adding that position, and Dr. Jacqueline Swain have been a tremendous asset in addition to our office. And then another thing that I've learned in the first year is our organization is as strong as our membership. We're very misunderstood. The WVSSAC is the membership. It is our schools. And they've given us the ability to oversee athletics and enforce their rules. And we're only as strong and we're only as viable as our membership is. And that's why it's important that we're constantly in touch with them and working with them because there's a great turnover in education right now.
Before we talk about the misunderstanding and misconception of the SSAC, kind of go back to yourself. When you look back on this first year, was it more listening or was it more just go and try and put your own footprint or own stamp on the SSAC and just in general with the member schools?
It is always go. There is no off season. There is no down season. You're basically working. And if you're one of the assistant directors, you're working 3 sports at a time. You're currently in a season. You're wrapping up a season with your committee meetings and everything, and you're prepping for the next season. From my position, I just kind of keep a pulse on all of it without being a micromanager and try to be an appropriate communicator and boss. Unfortunately, my track record, being the assistant director over a lot of those sports and just my experience in general, I think has been a good process there. But we're always busy. People talk about downtime, but we can't find much of that, to be honest. But we love that. That's the passion we serve education-based athletics with. But at the same time, one of our big goals this year, myself in its new position and our staff, was education. And you cannot educate if you also don't listen. And so we put out immediate surveys and feelers to stakeholders. And what is it that you don't understand? What is it you don't know? And how can we help? And we charted a course then in which we created frequently asked questions. They're on our website. They're like one-pagers of a lot of what we call hot topics, things people needed an abbreviated, quick answer on or a resource they can go to get answers. So we've worked hard to listen and then to turn that and hopefully educate all stakeholders involved with our organization.
Along that line, these surveys, biggest takeaway, biggest thing that you learned from what you heard from these stakeholders that hopefully you guys can apply leading into the 26-27 season?
Our organization is very misunderstood. I think that was...
Why? Why do you think that is?
Just, I think whether it's because we're a governing body, people assume we have all kinds of power. We're full of checks and balances. We are not a rogue organization, as we've been accused of being. We're not unelected bureaucrats. What we are is representatives of our membership in our schools. And, that's misunderstood, too, because we work for our schools. That doesn't mean we work for every citizen. It means we work for everyone within our school system network. And so that's misunderstood to a large degree. So we have to deal with that quite often also.
Yeah, I feel like people probably assume that you as the executive director can just wave a metaphorical magic wand and make a change, and that's not necessarily the case.
I have very little power, but I have a lot of authority. But that authority has been given to me by the rules by our membership. And if I could take a moment to explain, there are 3 places our rules come from. They can come from the State Department of Education, which oversees our organization. They have to approve all of our rules that our membership makes. So a rule could come from the State Department of Education. I'll give you a perfect example. The 2.0 rule, the GPA rule, it's not our rule. We enforce it. That's a rule. That's one of the few rules you cannot request a waiver for. That's in place. It's what it is, but we have to enforce it. We can get rules from the state legislature. Now, we recently had one repealed. The transfer rule was repealed, which we're thankful for. I appreciate the work of the legislature and the governor in signing that bill, that we were able to get that authority back to our membership to control the transfer rule. But other things the state legislature has done in a positive realm is they've taken things we already had in place and they've put them in state code. Emergency action plans, we were already requiring those. They made it a state law. You have to do it. Defibrillators at all of our events, state law now. That's a good thing. Athletic trainers required for high school football is a positive thing. Tough to find the certified ones, but we've got people there with medical backgrounds. Those are all rules that came from the state legislature. But the third way and the most common way that we get rules is they come from our principals. The principals propose rules and they propose changes to rules, and we meet once a year at our board of control, and they vote on rules and rule changes. And then those have to be approved by the State Department of Ed. They sit in the Secretary of State's office for 30 days, and they come back for final approval. So our rules are not based on a whim. They're based on a lot of thought. They're based on a lot of people's input. And then it's our job as the WVSSAC staff in our office in Parkersburg to enforce the rules of our membership. And so that whole process is very misunderstood, I believe.
You mentioned the aspect of you may not have a whole lot of power, but you do have a lot of authority in being authoritative in your position. How do you go about being authoritative but not overstepping, meaning not overstepping and going too far with what we could possibly do to continue to improve West Virginia high school athletics?
Well, I think, I'd like to think one of my strengths is common sense. And I think that comes from the fact that I have every role that we're going to be dealing with. I have been in that role, like I mentioned. I've been the athlete. I've been the parent of successful athletes, been a successful coach, been a school administrator, been an athletic director. Okay, coach. Depends on who you talk to. But I've got a lot of experiences, and I try to call upon those experiences and use them wisely, and have a common sense approach and treat people the way they want to be treated. Now, that doesn't mean you get what you want, but I understand the frustration. I used to coach, and there were times where I was critical and upset with the WVSSAC because nobody likes a rule when at the moment it's not impacting them in a positive way. You got to understand that, and you got to work with those people, and I think we're doing that very well.
You mentioned the transfer portal, obviously a big thing a lot amongst your member institutions and amongst the citizens of the state. I mean, it's been a topic of discussion for the last number of years. And you mentioned the state repealed their law and changed the transfer portal rule to put it back into your hands, and now you all have laid out and established your transfer rule. Explain that and kind of how you came to this ultimate decision of this is how our new transfer rule is going to be laid out.
Well, what we have currently is actually an emergency rule. It'll be in effect throughout this year, and our membership will come back and revisit it and see if they want to make any additions, tweaks, changes to it, etc. Basically, we were put in a tough – the previous rule by the state legislature, the transfer law, it was allowing transfers to occur throughout the school year.
It was essentially a Wild West. I mean, let's call it what it was, right?
There is nothing solid or sound about you being able to transfer anytime you want in the middle of a school year or in the middle of a grading period, an educational. It just the negative impact on the education process is tremendous. On top of that, athletically, because you get upset and you can move on a whim and be eligible, that's a dangerous situation. So just the fact that alone is removed and all transfers have to occur before September 1 is a tremendous thing. The fact that we've gone back to the part of the previous rule that we had was you had to transfer as a freshman only to any high school you wanted. You had a one-time transfer back. Well, in the compromise of where we were at with the state law and where we're at now with our current rule, we expanded that to freshmen and sophomores that can use a one-time transfer and be eligible as long as they do it at the beginning of the school year, not during the school year. And so now you've got the opportunity, if the grass is greener, maybe, or a better opportunity for you academically and athletically to go to that school. If things don't work out, we've still allowed you now to have the one-time transfer back that you didn't have under state law, as long as you do it before your junior year, prior to September 1. So the movement is going to be with our younger students who are trying to determine where do I need to be in high school, not with athletes who are trying to maximize their athletic opportunity or be taken advantage of because they've been in one program and developed, and here they came as a great athlete, and now all of a sudden some other school or coach can come in and convince them, or the public or somebody can convince them that they'd be better off if they came to school over here. Our juniors and seniors need to stay put, and they need to be the backbone of that school's athletic program.
Put on your educator hat. I know, again, you mentioned a few times now your background in the school system as an educator, as an athletic director, as a coach even. Not to put you on the spot per se, but I'm going to. When you look at how kids are using this rule, okay, do you feel with these kids, and I'll just call them young people, I don't want to say kids, these young people that are using this rule, are you, as an office at the SSAC, seeing this more as kids transferring or young people transferring just to transfer for sports? Or are you seeing the backbone of that still remaining being the two-worded phrase, a student athlete?
Well, I think there were way too many transfer just for sports. I think the whole point of you go to school, and obviously your education impacts the rest of your life in a much greater way. The lessons learned from athletics are a tremendous part of that education. Part of that is loyalty, commitment, discipline, and acceptance of where I'm at in life. I can set goals, but I can't always have everything I want right when I want it. And I think that's the problem with being able to transfer at any time you want, the problem it was creating. And I'll be blunt. I love West Virginia. I love West Virginia and Marshall athletics. I love our student athletes. But in preparation for life, we don't have a lot of professional athletes in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you something else. The numbers show only 7% of high school athletes are going to play in college, and only 2% are going to get a scholarship. And scholarship's a very misunderstood term in this day and age. And parents, because I think of a lot of the youth sports movement, they're very uneducated and very misunderstanding. If you truly want your child to be successful, the first thing you should do is educate them. The second thing you should do is expand their horizons and let them have experiences and life lessons through athletics. And I think we've sometimes gotten that backwards.
Adam Rogers and Taylor Kennedy, joined by WVSSAC Executive Director Wayne Ryan, here on the Game Day Insiders podcast.
So with football season coming up, I know Charleston's hosted the state football championships now for the last 2 seasons. It'll obviously continue into this season. There is a mutual option, though, for the 2027 season. I'm curious, your takeaways thus far from the first 2 years back in Charleston for the first time. I think it was like over 2 or 3 decades. Regardless, how has Charleston kind of moved the needle just further? Because I know Wheeling set the standard very, very, very high. As someone that went up there multiple times, is talking with you as well. How has Charleston rose to the occasion with hosting the state football championships? Also, have the discussions begun in potentially moving or expanding that outward for years to come?
First of all, let me reiterate your point. Wheeling was a great host for almost 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Did a tremendous job with the state football championships and had its own title, the Super Six, which we don't have anymore, you know. But Charleston has done a tremendous job. Tim Brady at the CVB, Mike Arbogast, our tournament director, Jim Hammock, Bryce Casto. They understand it. They've got a great group of people they've put together as volunteers that help them. The commitment from the Kanawha County schools to the facility and having 4 completely separate dressing rooms, all remodeled. The geographic location's good. Let's be honest. It's more centrally located. We've received a lot of positive comments around the state about people's ability to attend. It's went great. I was asked literally at a Lions Club meeting recently in a community in West Virginia, are you still open for business as far as the state football playoffs? I said, we're always open for business. I said, but you know, just like WVU and Marshall, who I'm a big fan of again, were a sexy pick for our state football championships, they weren't the best pick for our student athletes at the high school level.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we're always open for business, but ultimately our board of directors has done a good job of making the best decisions on where state championship events will be played.
So what has Charleston done that has kind of continued to move that needle then?
Well, they didn't so much do it, but they've hosted the four games and the 4 classes very, very well. They've addressed any questions or concerns we've had. They've immediately acted upon. We have received 0 complaints, and that's unusual to have such a large public event and not hear somebody complain about something. But we have not got that, so that is a praise thing right there. Joe Varney's great to work with at Laidley Field, UC Stadium. So basically, I think they've met all the needs of our schools, and I tell you what they've done really well is at the end of each football championship, they survey the participating schools, and they take their criticism, their concerns, and if there have been some small things like even how we enter the teams, where do we drop them off, where do we enter them, how do we get the band in,
Drinks in the locker room,
every little thing.
Yep.
They've taken it and they've made it better. And I used to, in my coaching days, we always had this philosophy: it's okay to be pleased, but don't ever be satisfied. Because as soon as you're satisfied, you're going backwards. And I'll have to say that the group in Charleston, they have not been satisfied. They're always looking for improvements.
I was fortunate enough to experience a state championship for football in Wheeling when I played for George Washington, and the experience for that was next to none. I mean, pads in your locker with your pads in your pants and your jersey on your shoulder pads and everything. I mean, it was all laid out for you. You just walked in. I mean, the reaction from the team was second to none. So I can imagine that as great as Wheeling has done with it over the years, that if Charleston now, and you say the way that they're experiencing it for everybody, it seems like it's going tremendous and could be a partnership that you guys look to keep on for a while.
It's first class, and I think you're a perfect testimony to that as someone that has experienced that. But I want to say this: I've talked to coaches, I've talked to teachers, I've talked to a lot of people who've worked in other states. We have a great relationship with what's called Section 2, the 8 states around us, as far as AD athletic administration goes, but also with the executive directors of those 8 states. We talk every Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning by Zoom and keep in touch with what's going on around us and what problems we share and what solutions we share. And I will just tell you this. We in West Virginia do a great job with our state events and our state tournaments for our student athletes. I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm very thankful that we can do that because of corporate sponsorships. If we were a state entity or a state agency, which has been suggested, we could not do that. But we get over $400,000 a year in corporate sponsors, and it allows us to put on first-class state tournaments for our student athletes. And it allowed us to expand the fields recently. Everybody thought that was a money grab. And I've talked to you about this, Taylor. The revenue is going to increase when you bring in more teams, but you know what else increases? Big time expenses. And so, we've been very fortunate to be able to expand state tournaments and give more student athletes and more sports the state tournament experience and lifetime memory. Baseball moved to Huntington, Jack Cook Field at Marshall, and we were able to in baseball bring 4 classes and bring 8 schools. Tournament lasted all week. But I think every young man who participated with it will be talking about it for the rest of his life. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, I got to experience a state championship game there at Jack Cook Field this year. And I mean, it was a fantastic experience. The field was amazing there with the brand new facility there at Marshall. I mean, talk about the experience for you guys as a staff with the SSAC and seeing that come to fruition with it being the first year in Huntington.
Well, first, again, I'll retract to Charleston, and I'll say we had great experiences here in Charleston with baseball for many, many years. And personally, I loved it. And Tim Brady, again, at the CVB was tremendous in that relationship. And my wife will tell you, when I came home and told her our board voted to move state baseball to Marshall, she's like, "Are you okay?" I mean, because she knew I loved a state baseball tournament. And it was a great experience here in Charleston. But I will tell you that, the people at Marshall exceeded our expectations, did a tremendous job, put their staff on it hard, worked it the entire week, and it was a good fit, really was.
Adam Rogers and Taylor Kennedy joined by WVSSAC Executive Director Wayne Ryan here on the Game Day Insiders podcast.
You mentioned the financial aspect with these state tournaments. I know people think that it could be a cash cow in a lot of ways, and obviously you mentioned the increase in expenses as well. How has, since the expansion of 4 classes in boys basketball and just even with these other sports like football, baseball, softball even, how has the budget remained close to where you want it to be while also maybe you've probably lost a little bit of money here and there, gained a little bit of money here and there? How does that budget work, and how has it fluctuated over the years since the adoption of the 4-class system?
Well, I would say that the 4 classes financially in some ways is a wash, but I want to tell you what it's all based on: matchups. We have no control of that.
That's true.
And neither do you. So it's all about matchups, because people are going to come of games they can get to and games they have interest in the big picture. What we have been able to do with 4 classes, as a matter of fact, this has just come before our board of directors, is we've actually been able to increase a small amount, but increase some of our reimbursement to the schools. And that's another topic that if you were from other states around us, you would realize reimbursement. What's that? Well, in West Virginia, we reimburse all of our schools for all of our state tournaments. Now, do we reimburse for all their expenses? Absolutely not. But the fact that we reimburse for, and the example I always use is state golf. State golf tournament loses money, thousands of dollars, okay? $7,800, though, is returned to the schools to help with their expenses of traveling, lodge, hotel, everything. So the fact that in West Virginia we're still able to do that for all of our sports, whether they're high revenue, low revenue, or no revenue, matters to me. And the fact that we're even making a slight increase across the board on our revenue and being able to give more monies back to school and to offset. You know, in today's day and age, attendance is not what it used to be at any event, any social event. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Church, club, ball game,
Anything.
doesn't matter, because we're connected now socially by this telephone laying right here in front of me that we used to not be associated. So we had to go places to see people and be a part of things. But anyway, because of that lost revenue, we are greatly appreciative also of our NFHS network and our streaming opportunities and our streaming rights that we have through the Federation, because that's helped pick up some of that loss. And this year, for the first year ever, we're able to return some of those. Anytime you have streaming and you have GoFan digital ticketing and things like that, you get some complaints. But we're able to return some of that money now back to the schools too. And that's just more ways that we can continue to help our schools, because in this day and age, we all know things are expensive, and schools can use all the financial help and assistance we can provide them.
I know in boys basketball, just in basketball in general, I should say, I know with Class Quad A, they went to a North and South region, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, AAA is also adopting that this year, correct? Or am I misunderstood?
That is correct.
So along that line then, could we, and I know in the past, and this is predating Adam and I, before, I think in the 90s, I think it was the last time that it used to just be the regional winner, and they just got, I don't know how it got determined who plays whom, but now we have seeding. Is there a possibility of possibly going back to just maybe just throwing names in a hat and just putting them together? But I know at the same time with matchups, it's also imperative as well. But you look at the games, especially from the boys side of things, that Wyoming East Logan game last year, even the last 2 seasons, I mean, that crowd, and then even bled into that evening session with the cap of Winfield and Ripley on the boys' side, that 9 o'clock game. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, I believe, of this past season. The attendance for that, I know you and I, because I know I kept badgering you. I'm like, what are these numbers? I want to know these numbers. Like, does that thought ever come across to you as just to getting away from seeding in certain sports and going back to just throwing names in the hat and just going from there? Or how do you go about approaching that?
Well, I think our system in place is fairly solid. I think every system, you can obviously throw darts at it and find some issues, but if we had control and picked matchups, that would be strictly based on money. That would be a terrible situation. I mean, that would be a DuPont Woodrow right off the bat. Everybody knows that.
Huge crowd.
Yeah. So
was like 13,000 for that game.
Yes.
You got a picture hanging up in the office too of that.
We do.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to kick off the tournament. I mean, financially, you make a lot of money. It's not what it's about.
Yeah.
I think the seeding process. I mean, we've had a few hiccups there. We had a few hiccups last year. We know that. We've tried to put a few more stop gaps in there to solve those issues, continue to, and we're looking at other options. But right now, the seating seems to work. I think it's fairest all the way around. And I think that we've had some teams with the 4 classes get to the tournament that wouldn't get to it otherwise. I'll tell you a great example was probably this year in baseball. I know we were talking about basketball, but this one's fresh on my mind. We've had it in basketball too, but I don't know if you were at baseball when Sherman won the state championship, and you're able to follow social media and see their celebrations and the way they went back home and everything. That wouldn't have happened without 4 classes. And I mean, wow. I mean, what great experience for the community, everybody involved. And I think that's something that we're blessed to be just the right size of state in West Virginia. We can pull that off. We're not smaller to the point that it's pushing the envelope, and we're not so big that it's watered down. And it's I think we have to be careful about the fact that, and again, this is my own personal philosophy, but I think our Quad A schools are always going to be a smaller group, because I think for true competitive balance, it's the other groups that need split appropriately. You've always got to have more schools in Class A because you have more schools that don't sponsor all sports. And I think that's sometimes misunderstood too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, you mentioned thought it was a money grab, expanding the tournaments and going to 4 classes. But you look at it again, a team, you mentioned Sherman, but on the girls' side of things, softball, Morgantown, if I'm correct, right, made their first ever state tournament appearance in softball and won the whole thing.
And had never won it.
Yeah, and that doesn't
Correct.
happen if you don't make that expansion and let these players have the opportunity to get to a state tournament.
Absolutely. And you know, we thought, okay, 8 versus 1, you're going to have more issues in some of these other sports. We had experimented in basketball. It turned out okay. It really was pretty competitive. Things turned out well.
I think the other side of it too, just to kind of expand, I know I've been a proponent, I know I've told you about this, Wayne, but expanding on what you guys have been talking about, because I know I've focused so much on basketball, but even look back to the first year that you guys had adopted the 4-class system. Even since then, there have been so many first-time winners in boys and girls basketball that I don't think people are. I don't want to put words in their mouth per se, but at the same time, there's been a lot of first-time winners, and it's good. I mean, you look at the first year again, man has an unbelievable run. They make it all the way to the championship game. They win. What an unbelievable team that was with Coach Bill Evans down there in the southern portion of the state. But just I think just continuing that and the positive side of things. I know so many people look at the negative side of things, and I know one of the negatives, and I know I'm probably seeing too negative almost with this question, but just with how school enrollment has continued to decline in West Virginia, how do you as the executive director then approach, do we go a 5th class to try and break it up even more so? Do we break it into 6? Do we kind of shrink it down where it's just 2 or 3 big classes? How do you go about doing that whenever we are in a state where the student enrollment is declining?
And you're seeing more charter schools and private schools pop up as well with the advent of the Hope Scholarship. I mean, the landscape for you guys has changed quite a bit from when Taylor and I were in school just 15, 20 years ago.
Whoa, hold on. I graduated 8 years ago. Anyway.
Well, you were still in school then.
It's changed tremendously in 8 years.
Yeah,
too,
it has.
And it will continue to change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to evaluate and adjust at all times. And that's why we do listen. We talked about that earlier. But I think for right now, to answer your question, and I think it touches kind of on what I'd already said, I think that's why our Quad A's got to remain a smaller class, because I just to be blunt, I think there's a select group of schools that are competitive with each other who are going to win state championships. And if you throw a lot of other schools in Quad A, they're never competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a factor. Like you're talking about, we just added on a probationary period 3 private schools to our membership. We just added one that is off their probation, coming back. Summit Christian now becomes a full-fledged member. We've got 3 private schools coming on as probationary members for this year.
Bible Center being one of those, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
I
Mount Hope Christian, West Logan, and Covenant
Okay.
are the 3. So obviously those schools have athletics, but every program may not be as strong as some others. So I know a lot of people have asked through the years about classification of private schools in their own class. I think Wheeling Central, Charleston Catholic, and Huntington St. Joe obviously tell you why they really can't be put in just a private school classification at this point competitively. And I appreciate the fact that a lot of them have had the opportunity to play up a class and in the appropriate sports. For the most part, they have agreed to do that. I think that's really created more harmony around the state because they're competing in Class AA where they belong competitively.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, their enrollment is less, but competitively, that's where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's proven they still win some, but don't win all the time. Public schools still win some. They don't win all the time. So I think we've got a pretty good mesh right there, and I just hope we can maintain it.
And even Wheeling Central, again, I know you keep going back to the first year of the 4-class being adopted, but Wheeling Central even played up in Class AAA.
They did.
And made it very far in the Boys State basketball tournament as well. So I just think what you're saying is aligning with what we've seen. And then so along that line, how do you kind of continue to counterbalance the voices of the public school system, but also weighing in the private school opinions and voices as well? How do you go about funneling and just dealing with those two sets of voices?
That goes back to my experience for 30 years because I've been on all ends of that, okay? But so it's an opportunity to explain it. If you feel the private schools have an advantage or have had an advantage, there is no action that the WVSSAC could take. Even our membership at times voted to do certain things, put all private schools in one section, put private schools in their own division. All that's passed our membership before, not been approved by the State Board of Education, which goes back to, again, I say we're not a rogue organization. There are a lot of checks and balances in our process. Okay, but the state legislature voted in private schools to our membership in 1974, I believe. Our membership never voted private schools into the membership. The state legislature put them in, and the wording of that law says they have to be treated the exact same way as all other members. And that's why West Virginia, unlike Ohio, cannot have a multiplier where a private school student counts as a student and a half or two in enrollment figures. We can't do that. It's against state law. We can't put them isolated in their own category. It's against state law. They have to be treated the same, which is why, our classification system that we had, previously, in which we had economic numbers, geographic location, several factors built in. The reason that did work to some degree is it treated every school the same, private or public, but the private schools that are based in the center of a city, were scored differently. So that worked for a while. But once we were expanding to 4 classes, then that kind of proved not to be a formula that was working well for a lot of schools on the fringe. So our membership was able to go back and draw their own lines and their numbers for membership. This is a classification year. It'll be interesting to see, once we get the October numbers from the State Department, what shakes out. And then we'll do our best, to put everybody where they belong and move forward from there. But it's interesting. We'll continue to keep our pulse on it and look at it at all times. But right now, I think we're okay with 4 classes as long as we don't think we can just put them in 4 equal classes.
Adam Rogers and Taylor Kennedy, joined by WVSSAC Executive Director Wayne Ryan here on the Game Day Insiders podcast. Let's talk about something that I know is a problem across the country, and you've talked about it a lot in your time over the last year as Executive Director here in West Virginia about referees and having a shortage and referees retiring and having a hard time finding younger referees to come in and replace them. What's something that you all as an organization are doing to try to recruit these younger referees to come out and join your organization and to get certified to be an official?
You can do a lot of media campaigns, and we work with the National Federation on several of those. I'm not saying they're not effective to some degree. Anytime you get it out there, you're planting a seed. But oftentimes with young people, you're planting the seed for later when their life gets a little more established. They've got some availability. We're also, we've adopted a program in a lot of our sports called Ref Reps, where if Adam wants to be an official, instead of him having to come to the local board, sit in a seat for 30 hours and get, instruction, he can do his first 15 hours online at his own schedule. Now he comes in a little bit ahead, ready for some more specific training about actually the on-court, on-field type stuff. That's helped. We also have realized just as important as recruiting is right now is retention. Sportsmanship's always a factor, and we try to, continue to emphasize that sportsmanship matters. But retention of our officials, and some of that has really improved in our office through Rex Foster's our manager of officials, and he's done a great job establishing a good and supportive culture for our officials. And I think that's been helpful. So we're just continuing to always look for small ways, but the greatest recruiting tool for an official is another official, and we rely on them heavily in that aspect.
One criticism I've heard, though, from other officials here in the state is that there's not necessarily a shortage, but there's just not as many games spread around to some of them as they think there should be. So what is your response or reaction to that necessarily, that you have enough, but maybe the games just aren't divided evenly per se?
Well, I think that goes back to, younger officials want to climb the ladder immediately, and there are some dues to be paid. There's some progress to be made, some lessons to be learned, and you're not going to be calling a state tournament within 2 or 3 years of becoming a registered official. And I think some of that is understanding that in most cases in our boards, the assigner in that board that makes those assignments is trying to keep all that in perspective and help that official develop. Now, granted, there are a few exceptions to every rule that they can climb the ladder quickly. They're gifted. They got it. Some people instinctively can do things that others need more training.
Of course.
But there is also, and we've really tried to address this. There is an old school, old boy network in which certain veteran officials maybe want to keep certain big games or certain experiences or certain number of games, under their schedule and not share that wealth, so to speak. And we certainly look negative upon that. I'll absolutely mention that.
Yeah, because you mentioned retention obviously is a huge thing of
matters.
trying to keep them around. I mean, you got to once you get those younger officials in the door, how do you try to keep them engaged and keep them wanting to do it to continue to get to that point of being a grizzled vet where they've done it for 20 or 30 years?
I think it's important that we mentors work, and I think it's important that we use our young officials appropriately in a combination with our veteran officials so that they're protected and supported and developed at the same time.
I know, just to kind of add on to this before I ask my next question, but just kind of adding on, I actually took the referee class last fall, and shout out to Dave Boggess and Scott Brown for conducting the class down in the Putnam County area. They made it a point to where, I don't know if it's their board's rule or however that shakes out, but there has to be a veteran official with a younger official, and it goes back to the mentorship program. And when you said that, I immediately just went to it. And I'm like, that's how I think you get the retention instead of just throwing, a young official out into a fire. You get that mentor with them instead of having 25, 30 young parents at a youth basketball game. Instead of just going at this young official, they have someone that can be with the official, can have someone with them and say, okay, back off. They know how to handle it compared to the younger. They don't want to overstep. There's so many different variables that go along with it. So I think just adding on to that, I wanted to give those flowers to where that needs to be distributed. But going back to the spring season, one of the things that I saw during softball, excuse me, I know with the big sports like baseball, softball, football, basketball, especially with football, basketball, and baseball, all those tournaments end on Saturday. Softball ends on a Friday. And I know so often you want to try and level the playing field for everybody involved. I get it. I respect it. Has there been talks of potentially moving or shifting that schedule to where it goes to, whether it be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever that may look like? Has those talks been discussed within your office to go to a Saturday championship day compared to a Friday championship day for softball?
Well, whether it's cheerleading, whether it's softball, or it's volleyball, the move to play those tournaments and not finish them on a weekend has been received very well.
Mm-hmm.
When I say received very well, it's been received very well financially by attendance. It's been received very well by the school administration, who may be dealing with a volleyball tournament overlapping with state football playoffs. Now we've figured out a way not to conflict. Same thing with cheerleading. So if you ever look at our calendar, you look at all the sports we sponsor, and you can find a better way, we're certainly willing to listen to you. But trust me, we look at those things hard. And the other thing is, very few things we do are done at the SSAC office without input from our people. That goes back to the listening aspect. We have coaches committees in every sport, and we meet with them, and they are representative of all areas of the state. There are 5 from each region, 3 at large, and they take input from their people. Now, again, does that mean everybody gets everything they want? No. But it means their input matters. They're called advisory committees, and we listen to them in every sport. And those changes in the sports we made that are played, and I'll tell you specifically to your questions about softball. Remember, do you want everything, or do you want most everything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to get double elimination and 8 teams instead of 4, you couldn't have Saturday 2. Single elimination, different scenario. 4 teams instead of 8, different scenario. But they got 8 teams. They got double elimination, and they really don't mind that their tournament's over because, we're going straight. This year, we're finishing softball on Friday and starting baseball on Saturday. And, so though we have already accommodated softball in a lot of ways so we could let that expansion happen. And, again, that was spearheaded through the coaches' organizations.
One final question for me. I know so often, and I know we've mentioned it so many times, the L word in listening. What do you think is the biggest piece of criticism that you guys receive on an annual basis that you believe is fair, but at the same time needs to be understood a little bit better?
Process of how our rules are made, who makes the rules, which we've already covered, so we won't go there. But it's very misunderstood. It's understood by the state legislature too. And I understand. Hey, they're elected officials. So when somebody from their area calls in with a complaint that they feel they should, inquire, that's okay. But understand that rule didn't just come about on a whim. Okay. So that I think that's an important factor. Now, Taylor, regress. What are we talking about right here? So I had another thought and I've lost it. I want to bring it back.
Just the biggest piece of criticism that
I got you. All right. Yeah. So I thought about this sitting here, and I think it's that we're misunderstood and that every parent thinks we should be a direct, accessible line. We've only got 10 people in our office, 4 directors and 6 staff members. We can't always be a direct, accessible line to every parent or every grandparent.
And not every one of you on your staff is responsible for every sport.
That is very correct.
Certain people are responsible for certain sports. So if they call one person, that could be totally the wrong sport and the wrong person to contact, even if they try to reach out to you.
And we're very seldom just sitting at a desk, just to be honest. We have a lot going on.
278 schools to deal with, and you're constantly across the state, I'm sure.
And it's those schools we work through. And so we need them to do a better job and our schools to do a better job of understanding if there's questions, concerns, issues, go through the school administration, let them come to us. And that's who we work for. So I think that's probably, it's a fair criticism that you're frustrated. I understand it. But I think once you understand the process, you can see that we just simply cannot take every phone call from every parent and deal with it on a high priority at the moment.
I lied. I have one final question because I know we've talked so much about the state legislature and the legislative members that make up both the House and the Senate chamber. I know a couple of years ago, and this is just purely my speculation, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like whenever this initial transfer rule that they enacted as a law created a lot of friction amongst the SSAC and politicians here in Charleston. And that led to a lot of discussion of could the SSAC become a part of the state government as a public entity. How has the relationship between the SSAC and the politicians here in Charleston, whether it be from a delegate perspective or a senator's perspective, how has that grown and evolved over the last couple of years, especially after where we were just a few years ago whenever they enacted the immediate transfer law?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the transfer law part. That really put our membership in a bad position. And let's face it, it is really, I don't want to say destroyed, but it has had a severe impact on many sports.
Mm-hmm. It still has.
It has and will until we give this some time to filter out. And that was a negative. I'm sorry, but it was a negative. Thankful that they saw that light and decided to give that back to the membership. As far as relationship with the legislature goes, I think we have a lot of issues in this state to deal with, and I think they know that. But nothing riles the public like athletics, and so they get a lot of phone calls. So instead of calling us unelected bureaucrats or a rogue organization, I think if they really invested time to understand, they're one of the stakeholders that I've worked really hard in this past year trying to educate about what our organization is and how it works. Been very open, very transparent, very available, and our staff will continue to be, because I think it's important that they understand our mission is to protect and serve our schools and education-based athletics, and it's not to seek a vote, or it's not to just please certain people, because if you have a rule and regulations in place, there will be times where certain groups or individuals are not happy. That's just what rules and regulations are. And so we have to take the heat and the criticism and the abuse for all that as the WVSSAC office, and that's okay, because, again, we're just working to protect and serve and help our membership and our schools.
Mr. Ryan, anything else before we let you go? We appreciate you coming down here from Parkersburg and visiting with us in our studio today for this first episode of our podcast.
I appreciate the opportunity. One more thing I'm going to add is we're always looking for opportunities, and we've got a couple things. We're going to have unified cornhole in conjunction with Special Olympics. We're very excited about that this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we're going to have teams within the schools that want to participate. Special Olympics are providing the equipment and everything, and then once we get all the schools in place that want to participate, we're going to have an invitational state cornhole championship for Unified, which we're excited about, because I think West Virginia is behind the 8 ball a little bit in getting involved in Unified. So this is one of the things we wanted to do. And then we've got another project coming. The NFL is throwing a lot of money at flag football. That's no secret. And in our state, girls flag football is going to be available to our schools as a club sport this year. We've already put out all the information. We've got a statewide webinar coming up. It's basically the Washington Commanders. The Steelers are involved a little bit. And they'll basically fund the program for 2 years. They'll give them money for all their uniforms, all their equipment, and $3,000 for 2 years to get their programs and club teams started. And if we have enough club teams in the state, 32, at that point we would be able to look at bringing on girls flag football as a sanctioned sport, which would be great for Title IX. Mm-hmm. Great for, as you know, I'm an advocate for girls athletics, and I think it would be great because I know there's a lot of girls out there that like to play.
Is there anything else you guys are looking at doing, creative new ways to try to get these students out there in a different kind of athletic competition like that? I mean, those sound like great opportunities for kids coming up here in the next year or two.
The third thing we're looking at is esports. We have a lot of esports clubs in our states now. We've been contacted by some state affiliates. We've met with a few people, and we are looking at the opportunity of bringing esports on as an activity like band and robotics are now. Not so much as a sport, but as an activity to begin with, and be more involved in that, because that's another clientele that I think, that path leads to a lot of career opportunities.
They're handing out scholarships for those kinds of things now for college.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we met with Concord University. They have a very impressive structure and organization at Concord. And so that's something else we're looking at on the horizon. I mean, we're a small state. We can't get too stretched, but I think that brings in another clientele of student athletes, but it also allows that student athlete that might play a fall sport but doesn't play a spring sport have that opportunity, or vice versa. I play a spring sport, but in the fall, I'd really like to be involved here. I like the sport, I just don't play it. So we're looking at those opportunities too for those student athletes.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming down again. We appreciate you, Mr. Wayne Ryan, the executive director from the WVSSAC. Appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more of the HD Media Game Day Insiders podcast right after this.
Friday nights, packed gymnasiums, hometown pride. These are the moments that bring our communities together. At Burke and Herbert, we're proud to be your local bank, supporting the schools, student athletes, families, and fans who make our neighborhoods stronger. Because when our communities succeed, we all do. From all of us at Burke and Herbert Bank, best of luck this season. Member FDIC, equal housing lender, and proud to provide you with service beyond expectations.
Need a lift? Introducing our new protein bowls from Tudor's Biscuit World. Choose from our signature sausage bowl, packed with 39 grams of protein. Crispy bacon delivers a hearty 30. Or dig into our veggie bowl with 21. Every bowl starts with fluffy scrambled eggs, sauteed peppers, onions, and shredded cheese, with savory flavor in every bite. Each comes with a side of tangy picante sauce, starting at $4.99, packed with protein, full of flavor. So go ahead, get your lift. Power your morning with Tudor's.
Back here on the HD Media Game Day Insiders podcast, Adam Rogers, Taylor Kennedy, happy to have you with us for our final portion of our first episode of the show. We were just joined by Wayne Ryan, the executive director of the WVSSAC. Great conversation with him. Had a lot of stuff in that conversation, and we talked about everything from the transfer portal, from the expansion of baseball and softball state tournaments, to the football state championships here in Charleston potentially extending, and the partnership they had with Wheeling and with Charleston for football and baseball state tournaments, with the baseball now being in Huntington. A lot of stuff in there. I encourage you to go through and check it all out if you scrub through it a little bit. But don't do that. Listen to the whole thing.
No, it's kind of like whenever you go to like a buffet. Shout out to Eagles Nest up there in South Charleston. Great buffet selection, by the way.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored, but
they are a sponsor of Game Day.
They are.
Or at least City of South Charleston is a sponsor of Game Day.
They are, and I gotta give a shout out. It's like going to a buffet and you get like a variety of different things. I normally start with the salad bar and then work my way in, but no, that my biggest takeaway with that is the development and growth from his first year as the executive director, as he's been with the SSAC for quite some time now, but the growth from him in his first year to his second year. I'm interested to see how he continues to blossom in this role, because again, when you're having to listen to over 200 different schools across the state, regardless if we're a small state, it's still important to be able to listen and learn and adapt and just remain motivated in the job. And I think Wayne is definitely all of those in one. So I'm curious with how that all plays out. I'm curious to see how football and other fall sports and other sports in general continue to use the 4-class system. I know basketball's been around since the turn of the decade, it seems. So there was a lot of different things that we talked about, and I was very appreciative of the fact that he did that, because being on the spot, especially with the two of us, not an easy thing to do.
And driving all the way from Parkersburg to join us here in Charleston in our studio. We appreciate him taking
huge
his
shout
time,
out with that.
coming down here and joining us for that. Normally in this last segment of the podcast, we'll be joined by one of our fellow beat writers here with the Charleston Gazette-Mail or with the Herald Dispatch or any of our sister papers across the state here with HD Media. We'll hear from them. We'll talk to them about some of the big games going on down in their area for Friday Night Football, as well as some of the other programs in their neck of the woods for the other sports that we're going to talk about on here as well, and talk about the successes that they're having and where they potentially see themselves maybe in a state tournament picture coming up here later on this year. So a lot of stuff to go on here on this podcast this year. Taylor, I can't wait to get fully going on this thing as we're here just in the first week of it with the first episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't already, stop what you're doing, whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, but also hit that notification button as well, because it's imperative that you do so to keep up to date with whoever we're speaking with on a weekly basis, whether it be from a writer under the HD Media umbrella, a coach, regardless of sport, in the tri-state area,
and maybe your favorite player as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely talk with players as well as the season continues to develop as well. So, lots of stuff to get into. I know we're going to be posting once a week. Yep. So, just kind of updating you all as we go through the course of the 2026-27 season, and then we'll see where it goes from there. And
we'll also get a little shorter as we got a little far on this one, because we've got a great guest in for the first episode.
A lot of meat on the sandwich in episode one.
We got to let it breathe a little bit, but we're going to try to make this condensed and keep it digestible easily for you guys as listeners each and every week, and you can get the information that you need to know about on this podcast each and every week. But that'll do it for this first episode of the HD Media Game Day Insiders podcast. I'm Adam Rogers. He's Taylor Kennedy. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to HD Media Game Day Insiders.